The city celebrated as if nothing had ever been lost. Fireworks split the night sky into colors too bright to ignore. Music echoed from rooftops, laughter spilled from open balconies, and strangers hugged as the countdown reached 0. A new year had arrived, fresh, loud,
Happy New
hopeful.
Year.
But inside a quiet apartment on the 3rd floor of an aging building, Arav Mehra sat alone, staring at his phone. 11:59 p.m. He didn't join the countdown. He didn't raise a glass. He didn't even turn on the television. He had learned long ago that noise couldn't drown memory. The phone screen lit up. A photo. 2 people stood smiling under fairy lights. Himself and a woman with tired eyes and a laugh that once felt like home. The timestamp read January 1st, 5 years ago. His thumb hovered over the screen as the city screamed, "Happy New Year!" Outside, Arav whispered, "Happy New Year, Anaya." The clock struck 12, and with it, the past walked back in without knocking. 5 years earlier, New Year's Eve had meant something entirely different. It had meant warmth, crowded kitchens, burnt snacks, arguments over music playlists. Anaya insisting that resolutions mattered, and Arav pretending not to care while secretly memorizing hers. They had stood on that same balcony once, wrapped in one shared blanket, watching fireworks through smog and laughter. "Promise me something," Anaya had said that night. "What?" Arav asked. "Even if life changes, don't forget who we were before it did." He had laughed then. That's impossible. He had been wrong. The apartment felt larger now. Not because it had changed, but because she was gone. Arav rose from the couch and walked to the window. Down below, people danced in the street, strangers kissed, and hope moved freely from person to person. Hope used to terrify him. Now it just made him tired. His phone buzzed again, a message from his mother. "Happy New Year, Beta." "Did you eat?" he replied with a heart emoji and put the phone face down. Then, another vibration, unknown number. He frowned and turned the phone over. "Unknown, I didn't expect you to still live there." Arav's breath caught. He stared at the message, every muscle in his body freezing. He didn't need to ask who it was. Arav, Anaya. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, reappeared. "Anaya, Happy New Year." The words felt heavier than they should have. 5 years, no contact, no closure, just silence thick enough to convince him she had erased him entirely. And now, this. "Arav, you too." He hated how fast he replied, hated how his heart reacted before his mind could. "Anaya, I'm in the city." That sentence rearranged something inside him. "Arav, why?" A long pause. "Anaya, some memories don't let you move on unless you face them." He exhaled slowly. She was still the same, careful with words, honest in ways that hurt. "Arav, are you okay?" Another pause. "Anaya, I don't know yet." That was the most truthful answer she could give. Anaya stood across the city, near the river, where fireworks reflected like broken promises on water. She hadn't planned to message. She hadn't planned to come back at all. But grief had a way of folding time inward, pulling old lives into the present when you least expected it. 5 years ago, she had left without looking back. Tonight, she was doing the opposite. Her phone buzzed again. "Arav, do you want to talk?" She closed her eyes. So many nights she had imagined this, what he might say, what she might feel, anger, relief, indifference. Instead, she felt familiar. "Anaya, not tonight." She typed before she could overthink it. "Anaya, tomorrow? Coffee?" Her heart pounded. The reply came almost instantly. "Arav, same cafe?" Her lips curved into a sad smile. "Anaya, some things don't need changing." Back in his apartment, Arav leaned his head against the glass. "Tomorrow." One word had shifted the weight of an entire year. He didn't know what he expected from seeing her again. Answers, apologies, closure, or simply proof that what they had once shared was real. Outside, fireworks continued long after midnight. Inside, Arav finally whispered a resolution. Not to the year, but to himself. Tomorrow, he said softly, I'll remember. Without running, the cafe hadn't changed. That was the first thing Arav noticed when he arrived the next morning. Same chipped wooden tables, same mismatched chairs, same faint smell of burnt coffee mixed with nostalgia. Even the bell above the door still rang with that slightly broken chime. What had changed was him. Arav stood outside for a moment longer than necessary, hands buried in his coat pockets, watching people come and go. He checked his watch. 9:47 a.m. He was early. Of course he was. He had always been early when it came to her. Inside, he chose the corner table near the window. Their table. He told himself it meant nothing. Then he saw her. Anaya stepped inside hesitantly, as if the cafe might reject her for leaving. She looked different. Older, maybe, but not in a way that dulled her. Her hair was shorter now, framing her face more sharply. There were lines near her eyes that hadn't been there before. Not age, experience. Their eyes met. For a second, neither moved. Then she smiled, small, uncertain, unmistakably hers. Arav stood up. So, he said softly as she approached. You didn't forget the place. She shook her head. I tried. That broke something open between them. They sat. Silence followed, but not the awkward kind. The kind that carried years inside it. The waiter came, glanced between them, and smiled knowingly. 2 cappuccinos? Anaya blinked. You remember? Arav didn't look away. Some things don't fade. The cups arrived steaming, untouched for several minutes. So, Anaya finally said, wrapping her hands around the mug, you still live nearby? Yes. Same job? Mostly. She nodded slowly. You look steadier. He laughed softly. That's one word for it. She hesitated. I didn't come back to disrupt your life. I know, he said. You never did things casually. She winced slightly. That used to annoy you. It used to terrify me, he corrected. You felt everything deeply. I didn't know how to keep up. Her eyes dropped to the table. That's not why I left, she said quietly. I know, he replied. She looked up sharply. You do? Yes, he said. But knowing and understanding aren't the same. Anaya exhaled slowly. Then let me explain. Arav nodded. I'm listening. She stared into her coffee as if the answers were floating somewhere beneath the foam. I was drowning, she said finally. Not because of you, because of who I was becoming. I didn't recognize myself anymore. You didn't say anything. I didn't know how, she admitted. And you were building your future brick by brick. I didn't want to be the storm that slowed you down. Arav leaned forward. You never slowed me down. You were the reason I wanted to move forward. Her throat tightened. Then why? She asked softly. Did it feel like I was alone even when we were together? He didn't answer immediately. Because the truth was uncomfortable. Because I was afraid, he said at last. Afraid that if I acknowledged your pain, I'd have to face my own. Tears shimmered in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. I left because I thought love shouldn't feel lonely, she whispered. He nodded once. You were right. They sat in that truth, letting it settle between them. Outside, the city moved on. Inside, time folded back on itself. Did you ever hate me? She asked. No, Arav replied instantly. I tried. It didn't work. She smiled sadly. I hated myself enough for both of us. Another silence. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Worn, creased, familiar. He recognized it immediately. My New Year list, she said. The one you used to tease me about. He took it carefully. I found it last week, she continued. Packed inside an old book. Every resolution came true, except one. He unfolded it. At the bottom, in her handwriting, Don't run when things get hard. His chest tightened. You came back, he said softly. That counts. Maybe, she replied. Or maybe I'm just tired of carrying ghosts into New Year's. He looked at her then, not the woman who left, not the memory, but the person sitting across from him now. What happens after today, he asked. She met his gaze. That depends. Are we reopening wounds, or finally letting them heal? He considered the question carefully. Maybe, he said, healing requires reopening. Carefully, her lips curved into a gentle smile. You've learned to sit with discomfort. You taught me, he said. The bill arrived. Neither of them reached for it at first. Walk, she suggested. Same route, he asked. She nodded. Some things don't need changing. They stepped outside together, the winter air crisp and honest as they walked toward the river. Arav realized something quietly monumental. This wasn't about rekindling. It wasn't about regret. It was about meeting again, not as who they were, but as who they had become. And maybe, just maybe, the new year wasn't asking them to forget the past. It was asking them to carry it differently. The river moved steadily beside them, indifferent to memory. Arav and Anaya walked in silence for a while, the kind that felt earned rather than forced. The path was familiar, lined with bare trees and benches, carved with initials from people who believed permanence could be etched into wood. Do you ever think about that year? Anaya asked suddenly. He knew which year she meant. The one where everything almost happened, she continued. And then didn't? Yes, he said, more often than I admit. She stopped walking and turned to face him. Then why didn't we talk? Arav took a slow breath. Because I thought if I waited long enough, things would fix themselves. And I thought, she replied quietly, that if I stayed silent long enough, you'd notice. They stared at each other, two flawed strategies colliding far too late. That year, Anaya said, was when my father got sick. Arav stiffened. You never told me. I tried, she said, but every time I opened my mouth you were rushing somewhere. A meeting, a deadline, a future. Guilt pressed against his chest. I was proud of you, she went on, but I didn't know how to ask you to slow down without feeling selfish. You weren't selfish, he said. You were human. She smiled faintly. I wish we'd known that then. They resumed walking. After I left, she said, I moved cities, new job, new apartment, new everything. And I carried you with me, she admitted, not in a romantic way, in a quiet way, the way habits linger. He nodded. I did the same. She laughed softly. Of course you did. They reached a bench overlooking the water and sat. There's something else, Anaya said, fingers tightening around her coat sleeves. I didn't just leave because I was overwhelmed. Arav turned toward her fully. Go on. I was scared of becoming invisible, she said. Not to you, but to myself. I felt like I was shrinking to fit a version of life I hadn't chosen yet. He absorbed her words slowly. I didn't know how to stand beside you without disappearing, she added. You wouldn't have, he said. I would have made room. She met his eyes. Would you have known how? The question landed heavily. I'm not sure, he admitted, but I wish you'd given me the chance to learn. She looked out at the river. I wish I'd believed that learning together was allowed. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of water in winter. You know, Arav said after a moment, I blamed that year for a long time. Thought it was cursed, and now I think it was unfinished. She turned back to him. Unfinished things are the hardest to carry. Yes, he agreed, but also the most honest. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and sighed. I should go back where? He asked, too quickly. She hesitated. I'm not sure yet. He nodded, hiding the quiet hope rising inside him. They stood. For a moment, it felt like a goodbye. Then she spoke. I didn't come back for closure, Anaya said. I came back because I'm tired of pretending that year didn't shape me. Arav held her gaze. It shaped me too, she smiled, genuine this time. Then maybe, we're not starting over. Maybe, he said, we're continuing. They exchanged numbers again, same digits, new context. As she walked away, Arav felt something unfamiliar settle into his chest. Not longing, not regret, possibility. That night, Anaya sat in her hotel room staring at the ceiling. She replayed the walk, the words, the pauses. She hadn't expected peace. She certainly hadn't expected clarity. But what she felt most was relief. For the first time in years, she wasn't running. From memory, from emotion, from him, her phone buzzed. Arav, thank you for today. She smiled. Anaya, thank you for listening. A pause. Arav, dinner tomorrow. No pressure. She considered it carefully. Anaya, I'd like that. She placed outside the city prepared for another ordinary day. Inside, something extraordinary was taking shape. Not loud, not rushed. Just honest. The phone down and closed her eyes. Dinner wasn't dramatic, and somehow that made it perfect. They chose a small restaurant tucked between a bookstore and a florist. Quiet, warm, unassuming. No expectations clung to the air. No promises hovered between courses. Just two people learning how to exist in the same space again. Anaya arrived first this time. Arav noticed immediately. You're early, he said as he sat down. She smiled. I'm practicing not disappearing. He returned the smile softer. I'm practicing noticing, they ordered simply. Comfort food, familiar flavors. So, Arav asked, how long are you staying? Anaya stirred her soup. I extended my trip. I realized I don't need to rush this. Good, he said. Neither do I. She looked at him carefully. This, whatever it is, we don't have to define it. I agree, he said. Definitions can wait. They talked about small things. Books they'd read, jobs they'd taken, cities that had disappointed them, and then, do you ever regret leaving? Arav asked. Anaya didn't flinch. I regret how I left, not why. He nodded. I regret not asking you to stay. She smiled sadly. We were both afraid of being the one who needed more. He reached for his glass. I still am. So am I, she admitted. They shared a quiet laugh. After dinner they walked, not the river this time, streets filled with ordinary life. Laundry hanging from balconies, shopkeepers closing for the night, children chasing each other under dim streetlights. This feels real, Anaya said. Not like the memories. Like now. That's because. Say we're here, Arav replied, not who we were. They stopped near her hotel. Neither moved to leave. I used to think staying meant sacrificing parts of yourself, Anaya said. And now? Arav asked. Now I think staying means choosing which parts are worth growing together. He nodded. I can do that. She searched his face. Can you do it slowly? He smiled. I don't know any other way anymore. She reached out and hugged him, not tightly, not desperately, just enough. That night, Arav returned to his apartment and noticed how quiet it felt, but not empty. For the first time in years, he didn't scroll through old photos. He slept. Days passed. They didn't rush. Coffee turned into walks, walks into conversations that stretched long past midnight. They talked about therapy, about boundaries, about how love could coexist with independence. One afternoon, Anaya accompanied Arav to a work event. She didn't hide in corners. He didn't forget to introduce her. It was small, but it mattered. Later, she said, "Thank you for not making me feel like an afterthought." He replied, "Thank you for standing beside me without shrinking." That evening, they sat on his balcony, the same one from 5 years ago. Fireworks weren't needed this time. I used to think New Year's were about new beginnings, Anaya said. Now I think they're about new choices. Arav looked at her. Then what's your choice? She took a deep breath. To stay present. Even when it's uncomfortable. He reached for her hand, mine too. They didn't promise forever. They promised honesty, and somehow that felt stronger. The year did not change all at once. It unfolded quietly, through shared mornings, honest disagreements, and choices that were no longer automatic but intentional. Spring arrived gently. Anaya stayed, not because she was afraid to leave, but because she wanted to see what staying could become. They learned each other again, not as echoes of who they had been, but as people shaped by time, mistakes, and survival. One afternoon, Anaya stood in Arav's kitchen, barefoot, reading a letter she had written years ago but never sent. "I found this in my email drafts," she said. "I was going to tell you how scared I was of losing myself." Arav leaned against the counter. "And now I know that losing yourself happens when you stop speaking," she replied. "Not when you love." He nodded. "I'm still learning how to listen." "Then we're even," she said. They argued sometimes, about work schedules, about emotional habits, about the fear that old patterns might return. But they didn't run. They paused. They talked. They stayed. On the last night of the year, they returned to the river. Fireworks reflected on the water again, just like before, but this time, neither of them watched from a distance. Anaya leaned into Arav's shoulder. "Do you think the past ever really leaves us?" she asked. "No," he said, "but it stops controlling us when we stop pretending it didn't matter." She smiled. "Then I'm glad we remembered." The countdown began. 10, 9, 8. Arav took her hand, not as a promise, but as presence. 3, 2, 1. "Happy New Year." They didn't kiss immediately. They looked at each other first. "I don't want this year to be perfect," Anaya said softly. "I want it to be honest." Arav smiled. "Then it will be ours." Later that night, as the city slept, Anaya wrote one final resolution. Stay, not in a place, not in a relationship, but in herself. Arav watched her from the doorway, realizing something simple and powerful. Love wasn't about starting fresh. It was about carrying what mattered, without fear, into the future. And that made all the difference. More stories will keep coming. So please, don't forget to like and subscribe.